Welcome to another Infrascale how-to video. In today's session, we're going to be covering the new downtime assessment tool that you can use for your customers early in the sales cycle and throughout the life cycle of your relationship with your customer. So the idea here is to improve the clarity of communication and the clarity of the importance of the services that you're recommending that the customer have. Oftentimes, you run into a bunch of roadblocks where it's a verbal discussion of needs, and your non-technical audience is going to have a hard time really understanding the full impact of answering yes or no to which services you're recommending. So this tool is designed to customize that experience for each of your customers and give you an easy way to provide a clear assessment. So the first part would be the grade card. So the grade card is a this is a template that you can use and change, as is this whole workbook. The grade card is specifically aimed at that high level evaluation and status. As far as what you use to scale your grades is, F through A, I would recommend picking something like a C or a B, maybe B minus, to define the minimum service levels that you would need a customer to have in order for you to be able to do your job properly. So that means, have protection for all the major threats that are out there, have security services, control over vendor relationships, if that's also a requirement. But I would say you want your baseline service package to be maybe a C, something like this. And then what you do is as you evaluate your customers, you have your first evaluation, which is how they're set up when you first come on board. And then your monthly or quarterly discussions with your customers becomes a conversation of which area do we need to focus on. And so you would say, okay, well, first thing is we need to get, you know, your business continuity services, primarily backup and recovery services, up to a better standard. And then we need to work on security. And once those things are done, we can start improving upon saving money, being more efficient, more productivity. And then if you do have a virtual CIO type service offering of your platform, this would be another area where you could give a grade. And your evaluation, the first time, second time, third time, would feed into the grading units here. So as far as how to use the evaluation sheet, so I have this title slide, which is just an example of what you might have if you put this into a web interface. But first thing is to assess the cost of downtime. We do this with two figures from the customer. We need annual revenue and annual operating costs. The reason we are looking for revenue is because opportunity cost is time spent not doing things productive. So this is going to give us a measure of potential losses due to interruption in our revenue generating activities. Your company's annual operating costs, this is just the hard cost of keeping the business up and running. The reason we look at OpEx is because all the cybersecurity insurance policies out there today, specifically insuring businesses against ransomware, they can only really take operating costs and the cost of the ransomware into account, and that's what most all of these policies are going to insure against. And the reason is because revenue is too unpredictable in terms of saying, every hour of the day that we're in operation, we're generating X dollars. Sales just don't happen that way. So this is something that's very difficult to insure from an insurance standpoint, and you really have to make sure you're protecting yourself with preventative measures and then good mitigation or recovery options. So with these two figures, it'll break down and calculate the cost, the opportunity cost per hour of downtime and the operating cost of downtime, and then give you a total. The second step is to go through with the customer and answer some basic questions about both their security services or their preventative factors and their mitigation factors or their recovery ability. So the preventative factors, again, this whole workbook is built to be a framework in which you can, add, remove, modify as you see appropriate. So some of the science behind this is, uh, your preventative factors are going to impact the chances of something happening, hence prevention. So the numbers that I've used here to say if you answer yes to say having a hardware refresh policy of always having hardware within the manufacturer's original warranty, then you reduce the chance of hardware failure impacting your business by 75%. The way that we came up with that 75% reduction is by looking at kind of the standards of most hardware manufacturers, where they're going to build their products, and the rule of thumb is that 15% failure rate is kind of the upper tier of an acceptable failure rate within a warranty period. Once failure rates go beyond 15%, then it often becomes too costly for a manufacturer to continue supporting that hardware, which is why you have additional money for extended warranties and additional money for third-party warranties. So just having a hardware refresh policy can do a lot to prevent hardware failure. And that's how we go through all these as well with having regular monitoring, antivirus, anti-malware. Uh, each piece of preventative measure has a positive impact, reducing the risk of infections from malware. So all these notes are here to explain how they're being calculated. And then the mitigation factors, most of these are really just understanding recovery times and recovery procedures. A lot of your customers may not have the answer to this, but this is something that will lead you into more questions to figure out answers. Um, and then if you don't have the answers, you can just ballpark it from your experience based on what they do have in place. And you just have to take that with a grain of salt that this is an estimate. The last step before we get an output is to go through some very specific downtime or data loss scenarios. So the idea here is that instead of just saying you need antivirus because it'll prevent, you know, 60% of all malware from hitting your system and 99% of all known malware, is we give them a very specific example of what's happened. So this could even be used as a test case and should be used. So this description should be very clear to both you and the customer as far as what happened to the business. And then you work with them to answer what the impact to productivity would be if these things happened. So for example, with ransomware, we use a very common ransomware scenario, like with, say, Locky, where not only the have the servers been infected, but the local backups are taken out of the question as well. They've been either encrypted or deleted. And most of the end users on the network have also been infected. So maybe you have some remote workers that still have their own laptops. So if that were to happen, what would be the overall impact to revenue generating activities? So maybe your sales and marketing team, and what would be the impact to the rest of your operations? How much work could they actually get done if they couldn't access central systems? And then just taking the average of these two, you get overall business impact. And this is a standard risk registry template. You can look it up in the project management book of knowledge, look up risk registries or risk assessment. This is just textbook stuff. And then the third piece of information you put together for each one of these scenarios is the percentage chance of something like this happening, assuming that you do absolutely nothing. So even if they answered yes to the to the prevention questions, you don't yet calculate those into. So the idea here is we want to see the percentage chance if we do absolutely nothing. No antivirus, no user training, no backups, everything. And then part of the output is that you adjust the chance based on their preventative measures. The risk factor is a calculation that multiplies business impact times chance. And the rule of thumb is that anything that is above 10, so you can do it by percentage or just decimal, but zero point 0.1 or 10% above should have some serious attention to talk about both prevention and recovery options in the event that this does happen. In the output, we've made it so it calculates the total downtime based on the scenario and the answers to the mitigation questions and the losses, so which is the total cost of downtime that we calculated in step one multiplied by the number of hours, and then the summary just takes that calculation and divides it into both opportunity cost and operating costs. And then here would be a scenario where you would plug in what the result of an impact of a scenario like this if they had, say, disaster recovery as a service, in which case we know that restoring uptime is going to be, you know, maybe 1 hour as much as 2 hours. So we just put two. So your estimated losses if you have disaster recovery as a service would be about 10,000 versus 150,000. And you can do this for each scenario. And you can, again, you should modify these scenarios so that they meet uh, real issues that your customers are facing. Not all customers are going to have environmental impacts as being as significant as other regions. So you want to take that into account as you're going through with the customers. But these are good baseline scenarios to consider. And that's it. That's how you use it. One of the other things that you can do is you can kind of predetermine some responses based on the answers to the preparation section. So if they answer yes or no to, or if they answer no to any of these questions, you should have a somewhat a canned response ready to go. That way you know where the conversation should go next, and it can also help just automate and simplify the process of getting such an evaluation completed for a customer. And that is how you use the DR evaluation tool. So this will be a tool that we continue to modify, so we'd love to hear how you all have modified this tool to better fit your business and your customers, and we're always looking for feedback. So thank you again, and good luck.